Down and speculation. Today we're going to be talking about the Rams. The Rams are a team that I write in my article, but they used to be near and dear to my heart. Born and raised in St. Louis, been watching them pretty much my whole life. So it was pretty heartbreaking when they took off and left. And I get into that a little bit more in the article. You can go ahead and read it. Make sure you read the article that I mentioned that's paired with this video. It'll help you out a lot before or after you watch the video. So the first player we're going to talk about today is Malcolm Brown. Not a big name. He's majority owned. I think he's almost 100% owned actually in Dynasty Owner. So almost everybody, almost every league has a share of him. Like I said, not a big name. He was RB 44 in 2020 for Dynasty Owner. Only 7.2 fantasy points per game. That's below average. I mean, this most of us know. We couldn't really rely on Brown for the year. I don't think in the starter position at all. Maybe on your bench, but even then, I probably wouldn't have trusted him. He was actually the second-ranked running back for the Rams, believe it or not, just because Cam Akers didn't play much the beginning half of the year. I talk about it in the article, but I expect that to change quite a bit coming into 2021. Akers is the best back on the team. We know that Henderson's still there, obviously. And then I talk about what we think is going to happen with Brown. Last year, he made $1.6 million. I expect that to go up. It might stay the same, but it's probably going to go up just a tad bit, especially if he switches teams. What I'm looking at is Mike Davis type money, and honestly, I think that's a pretty good comp for him as well. He's not neither of them are excellent backs. They're average to above average at what they do. They could both, as you saw with Davis this year, take over a backfield if they needed to and put up, 60, 70% of what their lead back was putting up. And I think Brown can do that. I mean, Brown's a good back. He has a nose for the goal line whenever he plays. So he's definitely not a drop candidate. We need to see what his contract's going to do. If he gives anything under $3 million, I think he'll continue to be rostered 100%. But like I said, it depends on which team he goes to. So he's a hold right now, just waiting for news, and I'll obviously update everybody whenever that news comes out. Second player is Gerald Everett. Another rough season. Compared him to Malcolm Brown, he finished as tight end 24, which is pretty rough, especially considering how much of a wasteland the tight end position is and was last year. For comparison, Higbee, his counterpart, was tight end 17. So obviously Higbee's got a much bigger contract. It makes sense that he's probably used a little bit more, but still a very disappointing year for all the Everett fans and everybody that drafted him. What else we got? Yeah, I mean, he's technically a value given his low salary. And that way he's kind of similar to Christian Kirk. I talked about Kirk in last week's article in the fact that he's a value, but he's just not startable from week to week. I mean, you could have started him, but there were only 3 games where he had above 10 fantasy points. So that's just not reasonable to have him in. His highest total was 13. So he's still a hold along with Brown just because his contract is cheap. Hopefully he can go to a team and fill the tight end void. But if not, I mean, he's probably going to get paid $3 to $4 to $5 million, and that at that point it might become a drop if he doesn't look like he's going to become the starter for whichever team he goes to. The third player for the Rams that I want to talk about whose contract is expiring is Josh Reynolds. So Reynolds is tough, obviously underperformed like the other 2 players on this list, but I see him as an underrated player. So he's got Kupp and Woods in front of him. They're clearly more talented. There's no debate on that. But I think Reynolds is getting a little less love than he should have over these past couple of years just because of that. I mean, there's so many mouths to feed in LA for the Rams. He just really hasn't had an opportunity to get a lot of volume. So I think he could break out as a number 2 somewhere if he lands in the right spot. It obviously depends where he lands. I mentioned in the article that if he fell to somebody like Green Bay or Houston, or Green Bay or Houston picked him up through free agency, that would be that'd be good for his career, I think, and I think he'd be able to help both of those teams. So not necessarily that he's going to go to one of them 2, but if he goes to a team like that where they're looking for a number 2, maybe even a high number 3 wide receiver, I think he could definitely return value. And then I talk about how, like I said, he'd be probably the most second talented wide receiver on either of those teams, depending on what happens in the rookie draft. But then I'm looking for a Keelan Cole type contract. Keelan Cole this last year was 1 year, $3.2 million. I think Reynolds might make a little bit less than that, but I think that's a good starting point He finished his rookie contract. I don't think he's going to get the league minimum. He's more talented than that. So I look between the 2 to 4, right around the $3 million per year mark for him. And then I would buy him cheap if he's available. The team that owns him wants to sell him. I would be a buyer. I wouldn't give up a lot for him, but if there's something that you can throw in, say you're trading 2 players, then you see that the person you're trading with has Josh Reynolds, I would just say, hey, throw in Reynolds and we got a deal. Just something that can sweeten the pot a little bit for you, and hopefully you get that breakout in the next couple of years. So diving into the meat of the article, I broke down 2 contracts for the Rams. These aren't expiring contracts. These are just contract breakdowns that we're looking at, and the article obviously goes into a little more depth. But the first one is Robert Woods. So Woods is 28 years old. He was wide receiver 13 in 2020. It's actually pretty quiet, wide receiver 13. Everybody knows that he's talented. He gets quite a bit of volume, but it kind of surprised me when I saw that he finished at 13. And he has 1 year left on his $6.1 or $6.8 million per year contract. So this is his final year. And then I break down, actually, I'll see if I can pull it up here. So he provides wide receiver 2 value for not wide receiver 2 money. And let me show you what I mean here. So obviously I'll talk about that at the beginning. So $1.8 million per year. That's what we're talking about. And then what I did was I compared him to all of his peers, all of the rosterable. When I say rosterable, it's a subjective term, but not everybody in this $6 to $8 million range is rosterable. So I put the ones that I deemed that they could fall onto people's rosters, and we just compared them. And you can clearly see that Woods has the most fantasy points over those 2 years. 232.9 and then 243 in 2020. So nobody else. Parker comes close to it, Devontae Parker, and that kind of makes sense because he had a great 2019 season. Fell off a little bit in 2020, had a few injuries, so that was unfortunate. But and Corey Davis kind of got close this year, Marvin Jones. But overall, the last 2 years, nobody in this range has come close to what Robert Woods has done. And I break that down a little bit further. I don't need to show you. Oh yeah, I can show you. So his first 5 seasons, kind of break it down, what he did. And then we start to get into this. So what I named this was, I kind of put a little term on this. I called it the second contract sweet spot. And so I talk about that in the article. And what this pretty much means is he's old enough to have made it past his first contract, but he was not so productive in that first contract that he demanded top wide receiver money. So let me say that again. He's old enough to have made it past his first contract, his rookie contract, but he's not so productive that the first contract that he demanded top tier wide receiver money. And that's actually very comparable to Devontae Parker in the same way. They're making similar amounts of money. If Woods would have been a little more productive, in his first, he started to get there towards his 4th year, but let's say in his first 1, 2, 3 years, if he'd have been a little more productive to a lot more productive, his contract would be over 10 million. And so it's unfortunate for him, obviously, as a player and as the team that, he was on, the Bills, that he wasn't more productive, but it's good for value for dynasty owners, because we can find that, look, he's more talented than what he's getting paid, and what he shows getting paid, he just broke out late, and that happens. And when we can find that type of value, like Devontae Parker, like Robert Woods, players that took a little bit longer to break out, and they kind of fell right in that sweet spot window of 1 to 2 years where they got a new contract, and then they started to produce. That's where we can really find value. And I break it down, like I said in the article. Go ahead and read that, and it might make a little more sense to you. And then the second player is Jared Goff. I want to talk about. Goff's kind of a tough case as well. He's 26 years old. He signed a 4-year, $33.5 million per year contract in 2019. The main reason that he got that money was, obviously, we all know he was the first overall pick when he was drafted. And he played a great 2018 season. They made it to the Super Bowl. It was the best season of his career. I'll be honest, I bet it's probably going to be the best season of his career when he's all said and done too. He just was lights out. And I have that in the let me pull it up here. I'll pull up his stats so you can see it. I put that in the article, all of his stats. Yeah, so he set career highs in team record. They were 13-3 in 2018, passing yards, 4,688, touchdowns 32, and his QBR, I believe that, I mean, it's right next to 100, but I think that's the only year that he was above 100 for his QBR. If not, it's, it is the best one. So, and then obviously took the Rams to the Super Bowl where they lost to the Patriots. So that's the main reason that I could figure why he got paid so much. Obviously, the draft capital that was invested in him by the Rams, they're going to pay him eventually. And then just an outstanding 2018 season. And then so I go ahead and look at him compared to his peers, like we did with Woods, and we can see that it's not as favorable as we saw with Robert. So he falls right in the middle of salary. We've got Russ making the most. And this is obviously last year's money. It's going to be updated for next year with a lot of high salary quarterbacks coming in. But if we look at it, he really underperformed compared to who else he's playing against. You got Russ, Ben, Rodgers obviously is tearing it up. Cousins, that kind of surprised me. I mean, I know Goff hasn't had a good season, but Kirk Cousins' season is a little underappreciated in my opinion. Carson Wentz, he honestly shouldn't even count because he didn't play, most of his team games towards the end of the season. He was benched. So Matt Ryan beat him, and then obviously Ryan Tannehill. So of anybody on this list, other than Wentz, Goff is clearly the least value that you can have. And then I throw the ownership percentage in there too, 13.4%. I honestly think that that's a little too high ownership percentage. I mean, it's low, but the fact that Kirk Cousins is rostered in only 3% of leagues and Goff is in 13 is a little mind-boggling, to be honest with you. And I write about that in here when you get to it. Let me see what else we got to talk about. That's pretty much it. Yeah, the only other thing I want to say is that in the way that Woods was in the second contract sweet spot, Goff is kind of the opposite. He really overperformed, not necessarily overperformed, but he played very well in the couple of years leading up to his new contract. And not necessarily that it's a bad thing, but they haven't relied on him as much, especially for us fantasy players. We're not getting as much fantasy points on him. They tend to want to run the ball a little bit more than usual. And he's doing what he needs to do. I mean, they made the playoffs, obviously, this year. They won a game. So he's doing what they need. It's just for statistics-wise, he's not really giving you the value of the $33.5 million salary. So like I said, go ahead and read the article. I'll take that off there so we can talk a little bit more. Yeah, so go ahead and read the article. Go ahead and check out everybody's articles. They're going to be posted throughout the week. Go ahead and follow us on Twitter, Dynasty Owner. You can follow me. Let me put it up here too. Follow me on Twitter at Dynasty Jerk right there at the bottom of your screen. And then, like I said, just keep supporting us. We're doing great things here at Dynasty Owner. Tell your friends about it. We're going to have a lot of cool things coming through the off season. So I appreciate it, and hope to see you guys next time.